I was blessed to be able to live in Europe for a bunch of years, and there was this commercial that I remember. It always made me laugh, and every time I talked to one of my buddies over there, we saw the commercial together. It's one of those things that every time we get on the phone, we ask this question. And so it's about a book to learn different languages. I think it's the Berlitz, whatever book it is. And so it starts off with this kind of like crackling thing, and then all of a sudden you see these two guys, and it's in Germany, and they're like on the Coast Guard, and the one guy's training this new Coast Guard guy like how to like be an SOS responder type of dude. So anyway, it's his first day on the job. He's really nervous. The supervisor is there, teaches him all the stuff, and then the supervisor leaves. And he's just sitting there. He's like this. And all of a sudden, you hear the crackling, and they go, SOS! We are sinking! We are sinking! And you could hear that. And so the guy's like, okay, this is my chance. He's the new guy on the thing. And he's like, this is the German Coast Guard. And they're like, yes, yes, SOS! We are sinking! And he goes, what are you thinking about? And the German thing goes on, learn English correctly, And that's really the question today, right? Like Jesus poses to Peter this question, what are you thinking about? Like, what are we thinking about? And he says at the end of this, you are thinking to Peter, who is his first pope, so it's pretty darn important, this dude. And he says to him, get behind me, Satan. What are you thinking? Like, you're not thinking the way God does, but as human beings do. And so sometimes it's good for us to insert ourselves, and maybe we're holier than Peter, and so we don't have to worry about this question. But if you're like me, you hear this question, and you're like, wow, what am I thinking about? And I can't answer that question for everyone. I can only just think about my own thinking and wonder if my thinking is making me thinking. You know what I mean? This is a good time to throw out the SOS to Jesus, right? And say, all right, Lord, you got me. Like, that question is a really good one. And it's like, he doesn't just like, oh yeah, what are you thinking about? It's like, get behind me, Satan. So it's not just like any old rebuke. It's like a real rebuke. It's like a tough one. It's kind of like, And so it's good for us to ask ourselves, like, ordinarily, what is our typical way of thinking? Like when you woke up this morning, what were you thinking about? And as you walked through this morning and you got here, what were you thinking about? Because like if God is real for us, which he is, or you wouldn't be here this morning, then our thoughts would be God's thoughts. It's neat, right, to watch like a couple welcome a baby into their home and think how the both of them are thinking together, like, how are we going to care for this little one? And so their thoughts start to synchronize in terms of how are we going to care for this little one? Or, maybe a newlywed couple, as they start to realize our thinking is totally different. How are we going to live the rest of our lives together? What are we thinking about, right? Or whatever, sometimes we can really synchronize our thoughts with other people. And so that's great. It's a great quality to have. But what Jesus is wondering, are you going to think as he thinks? And that's really one of the key goals of prayer, of our daily life. It's not just to be in a spiritual spa and say, yes, I've experienced God and I'm great. Now I'm going to go out into the world and start thinking the way I did before. It's like, no, what is real conversion, metanoia? It's having our brains lobotomized in prayer so we walk out with the brain of Jesus. That's probably too brutal to say it like that because Jesus would not want that because he wants our freedom and our thoughts to be freely intertwined with his thoughts. And one thought that God always talks about, Jesus talks about over and over again, is the fundamental option or choice or thinking about the poor. Now, if you're like me, come from a household that we never had to worry about whether there was going to be food on the table, clothing in the closet, or a roof over our head. And if that's not a major issue for you when you woke up this morning, then we are definitely not considered poor. I don't care what your income is or whatever, but if you have all that, you're in a minority of what would be definitely considered wealthy and not poor. And so it's good for us to know that what does God teach us through his church, through his scriptures, through St. James this morning, is that if we want to, like, it's nice to think, yeah, I just want to think the way God thinks, law, right? But he's like, no, like, way am I thinking is like, think about the poor, like a fundamental option for the poor, for those who do not have all the things that we have, and to get muddy and dirty and embrace and even smell like them. You know, that's really the key. And it's so hard for us, at least it is for me, because I'm such used to a lifestyle in which it's like, well, I can write a check, I can do that and do that. And so it's like nurture by proxy. It's like, oh, I can manage that. And it's like, no, we need to get messy in that. And so one of the challenges, at least for me as I pray through this morning, is asking myself, am I thinking as Jesus thinks? In other words, with that fundamental option of living, of serving, and of being with those who are most vulnerable in our communities, in our world. And it is not for nothing that this morning, one of the things that provoked this is that Nick Sharapa and Karen Walker and Janet Roberto are paving a way for our parish to go spend a week in Kentucky in Appalachia, 2 weeks coming up this summer. And so they're sending me these pictures and houses and all these things, and it's like, these are avenues that are possible for our community to truly start to do more than, probably the best way to say it is to allow God, his thinking, to be our thinking. So let's pray today that maybe that German question come to us, what are we thinking about? And ask, Jesus, can you help me to think the way you think, so that our brains are synced?